Having proven he's very comfortable using hunger as a weapon, Donald Trump is now moving to use shelter as a weapon as he finalizes plans to push nearly 200,000 Americans back into the streets in America. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. All the while, by the way, he is building detention camps for the unhoused. That's right. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic about Donald Trump building camps, I want to remind you all that this is something Donald Trump said he would do when he got back into the White House.
Under my strategy working with states, we will ban urban camping wherever possible. Violators of these bans will be arrested, but they will be given the option to accept treatment and services if they're willing to be rehabilitated. Many of them don't want that, but we'll give them the option. We will then open up large parcels of inexpensive land, bring in doctors, psychiatrists, social workers, and drug rehab specialists, and create 10 cities where the homeless can be relocated and their problems identified. But we'll open up our cities again, make them livable and make them beautiful.
Well, I guess this is one campaign promise that he's keeping. And we're going to get to the building of the camps in rural Utah, which is happening right now. But first, we need to talk about the gutting of housing aid and the consequences for hundreds of thousands of people. This reporting from the New York Times dives into the funding outline released by the Trump administration's Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, showing how they want to steer the more than $3.9 billion in continuum of care funds, which they note is the main source of money to fight homelessness. They want to steer that to programs that punish those in poverty, taking funding from evidence-based programs and directing those funds instead to policing encampments and arresting people who were sleeping outside, as endorsed by the Supreme Court decision in Grants Pass v. Johnson, which gave the green light for cities to arrest and fine people who are forced to sleep outside with nowhere to go, a decision that we have talked about extensively on this channel. And briefly, because this comes up all the time in response to videos that I do on this channel on homelessness, we're often sold this false representation of the choices before us when it comes to solving the homelessness crisis. We have the choice between the conservative approach, crime and punishment, forced treatment or institutionalization, or nothing. That's what people say. Oh, so you want to do nothing? No, of course not. We want to keep the billions of dollars in programs that are evidence-based, like Housing First, an approach that the Veterans Administration has used successfully to reduce homelessness, and that large cities like Houston have used as well, where homelessness is down 63% since they implemented their Housing First policies in 2012. But conservatives come in and say, no, something is uniquely wrong and bad about people who end up on the street, and they shouldn't be treated like human beings who deserve shelter, who deserve robustly funded programs that can assist them as they work to rebuild their lives. And that's what we have here in Donald Trump's new policy, where, according to this reporting, nearly 200,000 people are at risk of being pushed back into homelessness. Quote, while President Trump has long pledged to pursue tougher homelessness policies, such as camping bans and treatment mandates, the long-anticipated document outlines changes that go much deeper and faster than expected, by cutting aid for permanent housing by 2/3 next year. The plan risks a sudden end of support for most of the people the continuum places in such housing nationwide, beginning as soon as January. All are disabled, a condition of the aid, and many are 50 or older. The document does not explain how they would find housing. Quote, there are people who have been living in those units for 5 years, 8 years, said Ann Olivia, the chief executive of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, an advocacy group. Quote, no one can wrap their head around the idea that HUD is about to kick 170,000 vulnerable people out of their homes. People don't know what's about to hit them. I've used the term five-alarm fire a lot since Trump took office, but reading that paragraph for the first time sent my heart rate through the roof. Homelessness is already at an all-time high. many millions of people are already living under rent-burdened conditions, where more than 30% of their income is eaten up by rent and utilities. And when I say many millions, I mean about half of renter households are in this situation. And yet, the Trump administration comes through and disregards the research, the work of experts, and the evidence, and says, let's just send people away to detention camps, as he stated he would do during his campaign. Zero concern for the root causes of homelessness, zero concern for people on the margins, zero concern for people on the brink. Quote, in cutting funds for permanent housing by about 2/3, she noted, the administration channels remaining money to programs that under federal law can serve people for no more than 2 years. That shift to temporary aid is essentially saying that people really don't need housing aid. They should be self-sufficient in 2 years, she said. Quote, there's nothing I can do to tweak the program model to get people to afford rent when rent is so high. She called the cuts in long-term subsidies, quote, catastrophic for tenants and landlords alike, and said local governments and charities could not make up the aid. And where have we seen this before? Food aid, right? Food banks have been struggling to keep up with demand. Trump had no concern for the millions of Americans who rely on SNAP benefits to feed themselves, feed their families, and was content to weaponize hunger to force the Democratic Party into submission and make a deal to reopen the government. And now he's weaponizing shelter. Charities cannot make up for the gutting of this government aid. They just can't. And we have the money because this money is being redirected to programs that punish rather than help, that are reactive rather than proactive, that mandate that there is something uniquely wrong and bad about people in poverty rather than recognizing the systemic failures, the inflation, the wages not keeping up with rental prices, the many millions of renters who are rent burdened, the number of homeless individuals who are working multiple jobs to stay afloat in temporary living conditions. But Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. He wants to be perceived as tough. And what makes you tough? Throwing people away. And that's where the camps come in. The camps the Trump administration plans to build. I don't know if you saw this headline from the Utah News Dispatch, but think about the chaos in the country that a headline like this doesn't continue to make waves and grab the public's attention until these plans are stopped. Quote, Utah officials unveil site for 1,300-bed homeless campus after long, secretive search. 15.8-acre Salt Lake City-owned property is west of Rose Park near North Salt Lake boundary after a long, secretive search. And there are several concerning things about this article. Quote, Niederhauser, a former Utah Senate president who has worked as a real estate broker, told Utah News Dispatch in an interview on Wednesday that he started working on the concept of a homeless campus just months after Governor Spencer Cox first appointed him as a state homeless coordinator more than 4 years ago. The goal, he said, was not only to expand Utah's homeless shelter capacity, but also create a long-term solution as the state faces population growth pressures. Quote, I started looking at possibilities where we could expand, and I wanted to have a property so that we had a place for a 50 to 100-year solution for the Salt Lake County area and region, Niederhauser said. And I knew early on that we were going to need to have a location that we could rely upon and expand as populations grow, as we deal with this very difficult problem for many years to come. I just didn't want the state to be having to look at different places every 5 or 10 years. We wanted a long-term solution. Now, implicit in all of this is the ongoing affordability concerns that are going to push many more people to homelessness, where this man will be ready with his remote prison to involuntarily transport and house people who are simply trying to survive poverty. And why isn't he talking about other solutions to an expanding affordability crisis that is going to create larger numbers of homeless people, right? Why isn't this man talking about what needs to be done to prevent expanding numbers of homeless people. He does talk about the cost of all of this, by the way. More than $30 million for annual operations and at least $75 million to buy the land and build the camp. And I wonder if that money could be better spent in other ways. And you know where they are turning to get help with all this funding? The Utah legislature. If you live in Utah, is this where you want your tax dollars going? To build a prison for people experiencing the debilitating effects of poverty? They can't think of better ways to spend all this money, like keeping people housed. And on that issue of transportation to the remote detention center, quote, Niederhauser acknowledged that transportation to the fairly remote area is going to be an issue, but we've got a solution for that. And that's having a shuttle system, he said, adding that it will cost money. But state officials plan to expand the existing shuttle system that transports people to and from the existing homeless resource centers in Salt Lake City and South Salt Lake. Quote, we've also been in talks with the Utah Transit Authority, he added. Quote, I think there's some long-term desire to have even some busing into that area. These conservatives try to sell us on these ideas as though they are our only option. And we know that's a lie because we know what works. While they're wasting all of this time and money and energy on building a prison, they could be robustly funding programs that assist people who are either languishing in the streets right now or preparing to be pushed into homelessness themselves. This is all a natural consequence of the criminalization of homelessness that has been endorsed by the Supreme Court, and by the way, greenlit by various Democratic leaders in blue cities across the country who refuse to grapple with the tough reality that is solving the homelessness crisis and choose instead to ally themselves with this toxic and inhumane approach to punish people in poverty. We know this isn't about helping people. When we look at quotes like those featured in the New York Times reporting on this, by the way, an additional article, quote, with outdoor sleeping banned, removal to the edge of town may become the only way some homeless Utahns can avoid jail. Planners say the facility will also hold hundreds of mentally ill homeless people under court-ordered civil commitment, and the effort will include an accountability center for those with addictions. Quote, an accountability center is involuntary, okay? You're not coming in and out, Randy Shumway, chairman of the State Homeless Services Board, said in an interview. Utah will end a harmful, quote, culture of permissiveness, he said, and guide homeless people, quote, towards human thriving. Much about Utah's plans remain unclear, including the details of involuntary treatment, what a proposal calls, quote, work-conditioned housing, and whether the residents will sleep in buildings or tents, but supporters call it a model. The reason why the details of the treatment aren't there, this isn't about treatment. This is about punishment. This is about removing visible poverty from the streets and finding a place to contain it away from society, just like Donald Trump said he would in his campaign video. And if you're watching this and you're not one of those evil billionaires, and I guess if you are, let's just pause for a moment and say, hello, evil billionaire. Please become a channel member where you can hate watch all of my content and even fund more content to hate watch, please. Thank you. But if you're not one of those billionaires, you should feel allied with every single person on the street. Why? You are much closer to being them than you are any one of these billionaires who hoard their wealth in the face of widespread human suffering. One accident, one catastrophic death in the family, one surprise, devastating health condition. And I don't say this to create a fear that paralyzes. We need to face the reality that is financial precarity while at the same time allowing it to engender greater compassion for those who are struggling, rather than allowing those fears to be weaponized against the most vulnerable. When those people in power try to convince us that those people in the streets are there because they are weak or they made poor choices, we should reject that as the just world bullshit that it is. They are there because a system prioritizes the wealthy and the powerful. A system ignores stagnant wages that aren't keeping up with prices. A system that tells half of renter households who are rent burdened that they are doing something wrong. But there are more of us than there are of them, and we need to pay attention and stick together to fight these attempts to take us backward. Now is your chance to weigh in, so please share your comments on this video in the comment section below, or you can leave me a fewer than 3-minute voicemail at 202-656-1509 or send an email to info@thepageperspective.com. You can join the evil billionaires in supporting the channel as well by clicking the join button below for as little as $1.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media at Brittany Page on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Take care, and I will see you next time.